Welcome back to the Stephen Knight Show. Our next guest is a well-respected author, public speaker, and veteran in the world of urban education. Many refer to him as America's toughest principal. Please help me welcome Dr. Marco Clark. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be on the show with you.
I'm glad to have you here. I was reading up on your background and wow. So tell us, let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your background and what led you into education.
Well, I grew up, man, with a poor public school education. One of the things that really attracted me to do well is because at 10 years old, I was a spelling bee champion.
Right.
I was excited about learning. I was excited about school. I was excited about everything that had to do with education.
Yeah.
But at 11 years old, I was told that I was functionally illiterate by a guidance counselor who never took the time to really find out exactly who I was and what I was capable of doing based on a standardized assessment.
Right.
And so that label it took away the energy from me. Once I realized exactly what functional literacy was, it took the zeal I had and the zest for wanting to learn. It put me in a different state of mind. And so I carried that burden of that label all throughout my high school career. I graduated 5 years instead of 4. I finished with a 1.6 grade average, 480 on the SAT, and I was headed to a life of detriment. But based on the fact that I had a two-parent household that I was accountable to, changed my lifespan, and it made me want to continue to work hard and move forward. So, education became once I got to college and realized that I actually, because I had acted out the label, when I got to college, I really was behind. And being there made me understand that, I hooked up with a great professor, Dr. Johnny L. Wilson at Clark Atlanta University, who inspired me and stayed with me and mentored me and told me that I had the abilities to do what would be next level. And because I got a solid teacher, it made me want to go back and get in that classroom. And I promised myself that if I ever had the opportunity to become an educator, that I would not allow students to go through the same challenges I did or to have the labels without actually doing the work to define who the child was.
Absolutely. And I can only imagine just at a young age how that can, and thankfully you did have that two-parent household where your parents held you accountable, because there's so many kids. I used to work with the youth that don't have that support back home. And so they just fall through the cracks. So you went to Clark and that professor is the one that kind of took you on your wings. What made you, what attracts you to him in terms of into the education, standpoint?
The fortunate part is that he was my advisor. So I didn't get an opportunity to, go search him out, but he was an advisor that really cared about the young people that were coming through. He wasn't an average professor. And as we started to have, I went to him and explained I was having challenges with certain classes, and, I wanted to give up. I really wanted to give up, but he said, because we had always been taught that if you read more, because I thought once I got to college, if I just read more, studied longer, that I could actually get to work and pull myself up. But it was more than that. It was deeper than that. And so he signed me up for a group of tutors. And so I had a tutor for every class. And, while my friends were hanging out, I was dipping out going to sit with tutors, and they were teaching me strategies like, how to use a highlighter to, break down passages so I could comprehend exactly what I was reading, because reading comprehension had become an issue for me over the years by living out that label of functional literacy. So he took me under his wings, guided me along, and he really made a big difference in my life based on that.
Absolutely. And that's the significance of good teachers, good professors. Now, you talked about it was a literacy test, a standardized test that you took that where they deemed you functional illiterate. What do you think about standardized testing now? Because there's a lot of talk about SATs and eliminate those or not letting them count as much. What do you think about standardized testing?
What's interesting is that the reason I was even counted as a functional illiterate is because I took on the old mantra of what people thought clearly is that, who finishes the test first is the smartest.
Yeah.
And so some friends of mine, we sat and we decided that we would just bubble. And so we bubbled the whole test, never read one question,
Mhm.
just wanted to finish the test fast because we never understood exactly what standardized assessments
Right.
were. As an educator now, I understand the premise around standardized assessments, and I think they are necessary to gauge where young people are. I don't think that they are a blueprint or the last finality of what a student knows or who they are educationally. I think it just should be used as a good tracker of how to see students grow, because
Mhm.
growth is the best mechanism of education, in my opinion. And so this whole thing around standardized assessment, I think it's good to give a metric, but we need to look into the holistic child and ensure that children that we're nurturing them across the board, not just on how to take an assessment, but do they really understand the information? Are they ingesting it and able to make it a part of their everyday reality? And so
Absolutely.
if we're not doing that, then testing is failing across. And as you can see in urban America, and in particularly in Black and brown communities, testing is failing because we are mislabeling students who are otherwise smart across the board. How
Yeah.
can you take a young man or a young lady that graduates from high school with a great GPA and able to go to college and has a higher GPA in college than they did in high school, but yet they didn't do well on a standardized assessment? Are you saying they're not smart? That's a
Exactly.
question that we have to continuously ask.
Yeah, because I know for me, I don't have I don't have a long. I'm very impatient, and so sitting through that, I remember sitting through the SATs and the ACTs, sitting through those. I'm thinking, we're still doing this. We're still doing this. So wasn't that kind of a student? Don't you think that kind of has to play in part? Play in consideration when testing, because each student is different. Some are great at standardized tests, and some can sit there all day and take the test. Some are like, okay, I'm tired of taking them and start doing B, C, B, C. What do you think about that?
So, you talking to an individual who didn't do well on the standardized assessment, then was
Yeah,
labeled a functional illiterate,
yeah.
took the SAT, scored a 480 on the SAT,
Mm-hmm.
bottom of the barrel on the
Yeah,
assessment. But I
yeah.
have a PhD now, and I'm the
Right.
founder of an organization. I
Mm-hmm.
run an educational institution, and we've
Yeah,
been able to help thousands of students. And each year, students are accepted to hundreds of colleges across the board with my senior class. So are you saying I'm not smart?
exactly.
I kind of think I beg to differ. So when we look at institutions of higher learning, they should be the final blueprint to detail exactly what a young person knows. So that I live my own truth,
Mhm.
and begin to understand that education is based on how well we are transitioning information to young people that can take it and they can transition it themselves into their communities.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you talked about. Let's talk about you're the founder and CEO of the Richard Wright Schools in Washington D.C. Tell us about that.
This has been one of the greatest honors I've had in my lifetime, to be
Mhm.
able to not only have worked in a large district, but then turn around and start my own school organization.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is the greatest gift, and I'm living my dream. So I'm a reality to everyone who believes that dreams can't come true.
Mhm.
Every dream may not come true, but some will. And this is the dream that I'm living now, that I'm able to breathe breath into these young people that I serve and their families in so many different ways, while they're in my organization, and even when they graduate to move forward, we're in a position to help change their lives. And when you
Yeah,
have the power of action and the power to be able to change a young person's life, or to be a solid person in their lives, to give them
mhm.
direction, that is one of the greatest blessings that any educator could ask for. And so right now, I'm living my dream to the best of my ability. And I'm
Yeah,
excited every day to know that I'm helping hundreds of young people achieve their dreams.
absolutely. What do you think the biggest challenges are in education today in school, especially in the urban school system? Because I remember I used to work with the youth. I told you that, and I remember I would do school visits, and I would see the kids off the chain. And I thought about, because I used to want to be a teacher when I was younger. My mother was in education for 39 years, and I wanted to be a teacher. And I thought about teachers getting into the industry, becoming their first year, and they they had that passion, but then they get in there and they can't control the kids. Parents aren't being responsive, and so it becomes just going to work. What do you think the biggest challenges are around that?
I always blame the parents. I mean, I wrote a book, Parents, Where
Yeah.
Are You? The kids are out of control. And part of doing that is because our schools in many cases are out of control because there's no parental support. You have to
Mhm.
remember that you have educators who have dedicated their lives to
Yes.
serving humanity, serving young people, serving families, and yet they are met with a lot of resistance. Can you imagine going to school your entire life, having to pay student loans because you were very vested in changing the lives of young people, only to be met with resistance of parents who want to tell you how things should go? I asked
Mhm.
the question, when you go to the doctor and you have a toothache, and the doctor says to you, I need to pull the tooth or fill the tooth, do you tell the doctor they don't know what they're talking about, or do you
Yeah.
listen and take their word for it? So a lot of people don't realize that educators are certificated individuals who have
Mhm.
studied the craft that they are a part of. And in many cases, they've had more education than the doctors you go and allow to work on your body in different
Absolutely.
parts. And so we have to get back to trusting them. Because there was a time in life when educators were the upstanding individuals in the community.
Yeah.
People looked at, they revered educators
Mhm.
in so many different ways, that it's unfortunate that we've taken that status away and not allowed the young people, I mean the teachers, to do exactly what they are supposed to do. And we have criticized them in so many ways rather than supporting them. So parents got to get back to business, and by doing things that they're supposed to do, and understanding that educators and parents are in a marriage together because they
Mhm.
have a solid relationship for the time that those educators are going to serve their children. And anybody that's going to spend more hours in a day with my child, then I want to have a positive relationship with them
Mhm.
rather than a negative one.
Absolutely. I told you my mother was in education for many years, and she was the one emailing the teachers. She made sure she showed up to every parent teacher conference, every school meeting, because she said, I want them to see my face so they know that this is a parent that's invested her children.
And
And so,
that's a relationship.
yeah, absolutely. So there's all this talk about critical race theory being taught in schools, and from what I understand, it's only taught in law school. But what are your thoughts about, especially a lot of these? And I'm gonna try to be make it political for you, but a lot of the red states are pushing eliminate critical race theory and these things like that. What are your thoughts on all that?
I think it's a sham and a shame to
Yeah.
be able to push away. You want to teach one part of history and not the other.
Mhm.
Let's just be realistic and understand that, first of all, back up to the African American community,
Mhm.
that you can't erase something that's being taught. And when you look at the Jewish community, nobody erases their history because the Jewish people have refused to stop teaching their
Yeah.
information. What's implanted in your mind can go on for generations and generations. You may
Yeah.
take it out of the book, but you cannot take it away from the information that's passed along. And so part of the reason that they want to erase in this critical race theory is because as a people, we have decided that that was in the past and it's unnecessary to teach now. We
Mhm.
got to change our mindset to understand that we must adopt and adapt the same way that the Jewish community has done. And they continue to teach because they said never again. Now, African American community needs to say the same thing. Never again will
Yeah.
we be in bondage or have those things that we have had to suffer with before. The importance of understanding the critical race theory and understanding these people who are putting out this information is that we have to counteract it with positivity. And the only way you can do positivity is to understand exactly what happened in history, because if you don't, then you're just doomed to repeat it and act as if it never existed. It's important.
Well, the argument for some of them is that it's making white students feel like they did something wrong when they weren't even there when all this stuff was happening. What is your counter to that?
I don't think that that is the case, that it happened, they weren't there. So nobody's blaming the individual directly for
Right,
things that happened hundreds of years. But
right,
what we are doing is making it necessary that you understand that this is a part of our history. And the same way that we study around about the Star Spangled Banner, and we study about the history of America, is the same way we have to study the history of the African American people and the challenges that we've been through and the things that we've been able to accomplish. Because I don't agree with always talking about the negative things. I think it's
right,
time for us to make sure that we are engaging young people about the positive things that African Americans have done, created, and been a part of. And we have not, we don't do a very good job of doing that. But I can't blame just different races. I have to blame us, because
mhm,
if we are the ones that's going to be upset about what political figures are pushing along, then we
mhm,
have to be able to know that we have the information, that we're arming ourselves. And so we're giving generations of young people who are moving along, and they are walking along naked with no information about African American history. So what else are they supposed to do? It's easy to infiltrate when you have not armed yourself with a knowledge base that can support and counteract anything that someone says.
absolutely. And I know for me, a lot of what I've learned was I went to HBCU like you did. You went to Clark, I went to Virginia State University. And in high school, my high school days, I went to a predominantly white school. And so I didn't learn about Juneteenth and all these other things, like Tulsa Massacre, all these things until going to HBCU and then afterwards. And so I think it is upon us to learn our history and to do that extra research, because it seems like in 2020, a lot of these things came to the issue when we start having these racial issues with the George Floyd and we found out about Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all of those. Do you think it seemed like, I guess for some people, that race was being pushed down their throat? And so we start seeing more diversity, but now we're seeing it's like, okay, slow it down. It's not all about race. It's not about race. What do you say about, do you think that 2020 has caused a shift? And what do you think about people that are trying to slow it down? Because I think with this whole critical race theory, that didn't even start coming up really until recently.
Well, I first of all, I think a couple things. I think that all of the marching and everything that came along with 2020 and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter,
Yeah,
it has a proper place is needed. But the reason that they're able to quiet down and never talk about it anymore is because you don't have the leadership in our community that is still planning consistently. There's
yeah,
not a consistent movement. When Dr. King and the civil rights movement was going on, it was an actual movement,
mhm,
and that movement was nonstop, 365.
yeah,
24/7. We're having gaps. And so what people are doing, they're fueling the fire, and you're working through emotions. But no change comes through emotional actions. Change comes through strategic planning and
yes,
consistent planning
mhm,
and consistent action. And
yeah,
what's happening in our community is that people it's able to die. People are able to let it die down because it's like no one is continuing the flame. See,
yeah,
flames aren't it's not at its hottest peak when it's blazing high.
right,
A fire is at its hottest peak when it is simmering, because the
mhm,
simmering gives it that steady beat that at any moment in time, I can rise up and I can
mhm,
come at you. I've never gone anywhere. When a fire is just simmering along, that at any moment that you decide that you're going to strike at me, I am going to hit you back with some fire that will burn you. And so
yeah,
the reality is that we have not gotten to that place because we are allowing the fire to go out. and then we're having to restart it every time. So that's easy for other folks to say, well, just let it quiet down,
Yeah.
it'll go away.
Yeah.
Because Dr. King became and those heroes of the civil rights movement, and before, they let the fire continue to simmer so that they made sure that everybody knew that we hadn't gone anywhere. And we have not done that now. And so that is a reason why Michael Vick spent more days in jail, more time in jail
Yes.
than the 493 homicides, and those officers who were responsible for the 493 homicides. He spent more for killing a dog.
Yeah.
Now, that is, when we look at a balance and is justice blind, someone else will have to answer that, because that is a great question that we're all looking for a great answer from.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you're referred to as America's toughest principal because you're no nonsense approach to Black excellence, especially in academics. How'd you get that name, and tell us about your philosophy around it?
My philosophy is, when you come in somewhere, you ought to come with the attitude to win. Failure can't be an option.
Yeah.
We've all heard that. And the reality is that what is your motivation? Because my mission is bigger than the challenges that's before me. And if all I do is think about how bad it's going to hurt and how bad those things are going to be challenged with, I can never accomplish it. And so I don't deal with excuses when it comes down to students. And I love to build professional etiquette and professional young people who are not afraid to be in the room to network with those individuals that others would walk away from because they feel like they are afraid. I want to give a voice to young people who don't see themselves 10 years from now. And the bottom line is that you can't be around me if you got a loser mentality. And that's where the America's Toughest Principal piece comes from. As I travel all over the country, I work with gangs, I work with communities that are just tough, places where people won't go, I go. I stop on corners and talk to people, talk to young people, because I believe that somebody has to have tough enough skin to get a message across that can change America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you're also called the turnaround specialist. And then where does that come from?
What turnaround is that any place I've ever been, I've always walked in the door when there's challenges. I've walked in schools and been principal in schools that were totally out of control. When I walked away, it was in control. Because I don't believe in young people. No young person wants to go to school to be a fool. No young person gets up and come every day and doesn't have a plan. Most young people want to be successful. The question is, do we have the adults that's in there who really will support them? Do we have the adults that, are not just there selling out for a check? Do we have those individuals? And do you have a leader that's bold enough to stand up to everybody and have the students at heart in them? I always tell my staff, I love you, but never as much as the students. And so that kind of mentality, when you turn it around, building cultures, building voice, giving voice to the voiceless, that's how I've been able to turn things around. And because it's head on, straightforward, no nonsense.
Absolutely. I read that you had the opportunity to meet former President Barack Obama
several times, and the First Lady.
So how was that?
It's totally amazing. And if I can just tell you, to be able to have a press pass to be able to go to the White House pretty much whenever I wanted to, when they were in office at their prime during the first term and second term, what was just a historic moment for me, something I'll never forget. But even more so because hundreds of my students were able to go to the White House, to get right there next to them and to report on things that were happening with them was an amazing feat to be able to have accomplished in my lifetime. I'm a guy that was told he was functional illiterate.
Right.
A guy who scored 480 on the SAT, graduated 1.6, but I was in the White House consistently.
Absolutely. What do you want, Dr. Clark? What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be, I just want to be remembered as an individual who gave his all to humanity, that I was about service, that I was a servant leader, that I was an individual who changed lives and helped young people continue to build bridges for others, that others may be able to walk through a path that was so amazing. And they could say, I can walk through it easier because you stood there for me in the gap. That is my hope. And that bottom line is, the last thing is that I was a great person, really good guy is what I want to be remembered for. That's my legacy to be, that we continue to build a community that will continue to build, that will continue to build.
Well, I can say this thus far, job well done, job well done. Where, and I know you have books, you have everything going on. Where's the best way to keep up with everything you have going on?
Well, you know, folks can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Marco Clark. You can follow me on Facebook at Dr. Marco Clark, or you can reach you can reach me on my website at drmarcoclark.com or brightmindspeakers.com, and you can reach out and be able to catch up with me. I may be in your area anytime soon. I'd love to come see some folks to do some work.
Absolutely. Listen, our thanks go out to Dr. Marco Clark for joining us tonight. For more information, go to our website, thestephenknightshow.com. We'll be right back.